Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Tet Zion in Maseches Bava Metzia. We are actually on the bottom of Tet Vav Amud Bet, Ba'imine Shmuel Mirav. Let me go over where we're up to and what we've been covering. I'm going to share my screen, and we can get started. We've been discussing cases where a robber sold property that did not belong to him. So I'll be the robber. So I took Stan's property and I sold it to Ken. Now, we just noted at the end of the day yesterday that the halacha regarding the ability of the purchaser to recoup his purchase price and his investment in the property, and that this changes based on whether or not the purchaser knew that the property was stolen. So if I go and I sell Ken Stan's property and Ken does not know that I stole his property, we actually are going to paskin like Rav, not like Shmuel. And we're going to say that when Ken makes an investment to improve the land, so he's going to have a claim against me, both for the investment, both for the original underlying principal and the investment. May be different as to whether he can collect from my nechasim mishubadim or not. Then maybe only the purchase price he'd be able to collect from my nechasim mishubadim, but and the investment that he makes in the land, he would need to go to property that I still have in my possession. But the bottom line is that he'd be able to collect both the purchase price and the investment. On the other hand, if Ken knew that the land belonged to Stan and he decided to purchase it anyway, so then in that situation, the land belongs to Stan. So as a result, if he invests in the, if he comes to me and he asks for his purchase price back, we say that we give him this purchase price back. Again, we hold like Rob. But when it comes to any investment that he makes, that's on him. He knew that the land was stolen. And so as a result, he's going to have to suffer the losses associated with the loss of that investment. Okay, now we're going to ask a very a related question. What happens if after I sell the land to Ken, this land that belongs to Stan, I go to Stan and I buy the land from him? So now the land belongs to me. So do I get to take it away from Ken? And of course, I have to pay him back his purchase price. But do I get to take it away from Ken? Or do we say, no, you probably purchased it in order to give it to Ken? No. That's the question. That's the question. So we're going to see. So let's take a look, and we're jumping in. Again, it's 8 lines from the bottom of Tesvav Amud Bet, middle of the line, maybe third word from the end of the line, Ba'imine Shmuel Mirav.
But who'd you buy it from if you've already stolen it? If you have already stolen it, who did you buy it from?
I bought it from Stan. I bought it from Stan. Stan's the owner. He's the legitimate owner. I bought it from the person who legitimately owns it.
You've already stolen it.
Well, remember, the land is where it is. I sold it to you, Ken, and you paid me for it. But now I'm feeling guilty, and so I go to Stan and I say I want to buy that piece of land, and he's a nice guy. He sells it to me, and so we
lost your connection.
No, I'm still here. So again, Stan's a nice guy. He sold me the land, and so now the question is, does the fact that you purchased it ahead of time effectively make it so that you're going to own the land or not?
So you bought it after you stole it?
Well, yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Remember, you can't, it's hard to steal land. I just told you that it was mine and you believed me, and because you're a nice guy and you don't think that I'm a liar. And so as a result, you bought it from me. And now I'm like, well, I feel a little bad. I cheated Ken because now Stan's going to come and take his land away. And then I'm going to have to owe Ken money, and Ken's going to call me a robber, and I'm not going to, I don't want that. And so I go and I buy Stan's land. And then the question is, but then I say, you know what? Maybe I don't want to give it to Ken. Maybe I should just give Ken his money back, and I'll hold on to this land because this land has beautiful views and I like to plant there, etc. So that's the question: is can I keep the land and say, Ken, sorry, I bought it after I sold it to you, and pay you back for the money that you paid me? Or Yeah, and make that exactly, because after all, I didn't really sell you anything. It's null and void. Exactly. Then we'll get to all of that as we go through the today. But all right, so Bayimine Shmuel me Rab. So Shmuel asked Rab, when the robber goes and he goes and buys the land from the original owners, Mahu. What's the law? Do we say that the robber gets to keep it, meaning me, or do we say not? Now, Tosos makes an important point here. Second to last Tosos on the daf. Chazar below Hikirba. We're in a situation where Ken did not know that it was stolen. Because if Ken knew that it was stolen, then all this is out of play, according to Tosos. Right, guys, Myri. The Kamibaile, im hagazlan yochel lebatel hamekach ulahachzir lo meosav olav. And the question is, as explained by Tosos, is do I get to then say to Ken, listen, I didn't own the property. So my apologies. Here's your money back. But now I do own the property and I want to keep it. And so do I get to do that? Or do we say, no, I already sold it to you, Ken. And now that I bought it, I've sold you everything that I had. So Amr Shmuel responds as we come back into the Gemara. And so we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines, beginning of the line. Ma macharlo rishon l'sheni kol zuchus shetava liyado. What is it that the first person, namely me, sold to you, Ken, the second person? I sold you every right that comes into my possession. And so therefore, when it comes into my possession, I've effectively sold it to you already. So by timer, why do we say that? So why would the robber, remember, Ken's not making a new acquisition. So somehow I am taking possession on behalf of Ken when I buy it from Stan for real. So why would I ever do that? So Marzutra Amar Nichale Delo Nikre Gazlana. I do it because I don't want to be called a Gazlan. I don't want to be called a robber. Rav Ashi Amar Nichale Deleko Behemenusai. And Rav Ashi says something very similar, but we're going to figure out a difference between the two, is that I don't want to be a dishonest person. I want to be trustworthy. I want to be a person that Ken says stands by his word. So my Benayu, what's the difference between the two of these cases? Meaning, what would the practical ramification be where these two explanations would yield a different result? So we're going to give 3 efforts at trying to do that, but only the third of them will be successful. So let's try. So again, what's the difference between these two views? And let's see if we can figure it out. So Ika Benaya, there's a difference. Demes Lokea. What happens if the purchaser dies after he buys the land after if the purchaser, the person who buys it from the robber, what happens if that person dies? Because and Tosos and Rashi have a little bit of a disagreement here. Last skinny line, end of the line in Rashi. Demes lokeach la'achar shalakha gazlan min haba'alim v'hagazlan bala hotziyim banav. So now what according to this situation, we're dealing with a situation where the purchaser of the stolen land died after the robber goes and buys the land from the original owner. And now I try and take that land away from the purchaser's children. So that's the question is does that work? So, but Tosfos has a real problem with that. Demes lokeach, Perish Rashi, Akar Shalaka, that it was after the robber bought it. Ve'enira, but that doesn't make any sense. Demiyad shikana hagazlan zacha bolokeach, because as soon as the robber buys it from Stan, as soon as I buy the land from Stan, then automatically the purchaser is going to acquire it. Va'atu mishum demes lei basar haki haka koko, and why would the purchaser from me lose any power as a result of his death after I already gave him the land? So Ela Yesh Lomar Demes Kodem Shalaka Hagazlan. That it must be that Minigzal. That it must be that the person died before the person before the robber acquired it. So we'll see why Rashi doesn't say that in a moment. But the bottom line is that it doesn't make a difference at the end of the day, but either before or after, I go and buy the land from Stan, the person who purchased it from me passes away. And so the question is did I still intend to give it to the person who purchased it? Because Manda Amar Nichale Delo Likri Gazlana, because according to the person who says that I don't want to be called a robber, well then, as we turn to Ted Zion Amid Aleph, Misle, the purchaser has died, so and therefore there's no one to call me a robber. So, and therefore I would not have intended to give it to him. Umanda Amar Nichale Delekum Bahamanuse, but according to the one who says that I want to be a person who's considered trustworthy, I want to be trustworthy for everybody, including the person's children. And so as a result, I would have intended. So sev karule benelo keakazlana. Well, actually, if you think about it, if I don't want to be called a robber, I don't want to be called a robber by anybody, including the children of the purchaser. And so as a result, that is not going to actually be a difference between Mar Zutra and Ravashi. So we go to effort number 2. And so Ella Ika Benayo Demes Gazlan. Oh, what happens if the robber died? So now in this case, clearly it has to be that the robber has already purchased the land, because otherwise he can't purchase the land. So the robber is good. So that's probably the reason that Rashi also says in the first case it's after the purchase. And in fact, Tosfos, if we take a look at the end of Tosfos, I didn't read that Tosfos, Umes Gazlan, the words in parentheses at the end, bottom last 2 lines of the Tosfos on Tet Vavam Bet, Sarach Lomer Shahaya Chola. It must be that the Gazlan, that the robber was sick and knew that he was Ogoses Bisha Shalach Minigzal at the time that he was acquiring it from the original owner. So if in fact the person was on their deathbed, so then they knew that they were going to die, and so maybe they didn't intend for the purchase to work. Now, of course, you could answer that same answer in connection with the first case, that when the and help Rashi out, that the point is that when the purchaser is on his deathbed or very ill, so then maybe that would be a situation where things would change because the person's death is expected to be imminent.
But Tosfos said there the meat kodem shalacha hagazim nigzal. He's talking about the purchaser, right?
Yeah, well, the purchaser is the Gazlan. The robber, again, remember, no, it's the Gazlan who's purchased it, who's purchasing it from the Nigzal, the one who was robbed.
But he's talking about the purchaser, who's the one who is, that it was, right? It says, the meat lokeach. He starts out.
No, he's not. The Tzarach Lomer Shahaya Chola Ogoses is referring to the Gazlan who stole it and is now, because we're dealing with the case where the Gazlan dies. So if the robber dies, we're talking about a situation where he was sick or ill at the time that he died, and that's why he might not have had in mind to give it to the purchaser.
But he's talking about where the lokeach died. Did the meat lokeach, right?
Yes, that's the first part of Tosfos. This Tosfos can be broken up into 2 parts. The part before the parentheses, which is talking about where the purchaser dies, that's the answer. That's the effort to answer number 1. And then the last 2 lines of that Tosfos are talking about where the Gazlan dies. So it's a little confusing. That's why I did it in 2 separate pieces. But that's what that Tosfos is talking about.
Oh, so he's talking initially about that the lokeach, the original.
Correct. Originally, the lokeach dies. And that was answer number 1. Maybe the difference between these 2 views is if the lokeach dies, and the answer number 2 is no. What if the Gazlan dies? What if this person who sold it first when he didn't own it, and then he sold it again, and then he bought it? And so what if that person dies? Because maybe, again, let's take a look back into the Gemara.
Oh, so then you have to include the parentheses. Normally we don't. He says, meet Gazlan.
Yes, 100%. That's the point is that if you take a look at the letter Tet in Mosoros Hashas, Ubasar Haki, and then after that in the Gemara, Meis Gazlan is talking about Shahaya, etc. So the point is that you have to, it's simplest to just read the parentheses. You could just read the parentheses, but the bottom line is the Masoret Shas puts back in much of that parentheses. So
he's
that's
changing the Gemara then, in a sense.
no, he's not changing the Gemara. He's changing this. Why is he changing the Gemara? The Gemara is talking about, again, we're now in the second answer.
Right.
And
so trying to understand who died. Initially,
right,
we thought it was
the
Gemara says Umit Lokeach, right?
No, that's the first answer. The second answer is Meis Gazlan. So we're now in the second answer, and this Tosfos is explaining both the first answer and the second answer. In the first answer, the Rashi had said that the purchaser died after the robber bought it for him.
Right.
But Tosfos is like, that can't be, because you wouldn't take it away from him. So it must be that the purchaser died before the robber bought it. But then you have a problem. Then Tosfos has a real problem with the second case, because why in the second case we said the Meis Gazlan, where the robber died, that has to be after the robber purchased it. So again, why would we say that the robber didn't purchase it on behalf of the purchaser?
Oh, so he's discussing the second answer of the Gemara. Tosfos answer.
Exactly right. That's why we went back to the Tosfos only after we began the second answer of the Gemara. So now we go back to the top of Tet Zayin Amud Aleph, the fourth line on the page, last words on the line. So Manda Amar Nichale Inishtalo Likriyu Gazlan. So according to the one who says that he doesn't want to be called a robber, Hamesle. So the robbers died. So of course he doesn't care what he's called. So Lamanda Amar Nichale Delekum, and therefore he won't have in mind to purchase it for the purchaser. But Lamanda Amar Nichale Delekum Beheminusa. But according to the one who says that he wants to be somebody who's known to have stand by his word, he wants to be trustworthy. Trustworthy applies even after you died. But again, Gazlana. If he doesn't want to be called a Gazlan, that's fine. But he presumably also doesn't want his children to be called the children of a Gazlan, because that's effectively calling him a Gazlan also. So as a result, even then he would probably have in mind to purchase on behalf of the purchaser. So now we need to go to answer number 3. So now the difference is no death. We don't have to go back to death. We don't have to talk about anybody's death. And so as a result, we can go back to talking about a situation where I'm the robber. I sold the land to Ken. I bought the land from Stan. So now instead of selling it to Ken, I gave it to Ken. So now it's a gift that I gave. So Manda Amar Nichale Delekam Behamanu, say, according to the one who says that I want to be trustworthy, Matananami, also by a gift. Nichale Delekam Behamanu, say, I want to be trustworthy. And so as a result, when I buy it from Stan, clearly I intended for Ken to get it. But Manda Amar Nichale Delo Nikruyuha Gazlana. But according to the one who says that I don't want to be a Gazlan, right? According to Mar Zutra. So a Mar Zutra would say, listen, I'm not a robber if I give Ken a gift that gets taken away from him. I didn't give him any. I mean, I didn't steal anything from him. So Amrlay, because I'll tell Ken, my Gazlena Minach, what did I steal from you? I stole nothing from you. Yes, I gave you a gift that wasn't worth anything, but I didn't steal anything. And Tosfos here says, my Gazlena Minach. So Tosfos asked an interesting question. V'im Tomer v'chi machor nami ma gazlu. 1 second. If I sold it to Ken, and I end up giving Ken back his money, well, then also what did I steal from him? Right? I gave Ken back his money. He's been made whole. In fact, I would have to pay him for any investment that he made in the property. He's been made whole. So I didn't steal anything. So I need to give back his money. So why should I be called a robber even in that case? And I guess the answer is one that you would probably expect. As long as I haven't yet paid Ken, he is entitled to call me a robber because I haven't yet paid him. So all right, so that's the story with respect to if I purchase.
So who's he giving the gift to?
I gave the gift to you. To you. There's no purchaser in that situation. Ignore the concept of a purchaser. I gave you a gift of stolen property. I then bought the property. Now, according to Mar Zutra, who says that I'm concerned about being called a robber, So I'm not going to be called a robber, even if I don't give you this property, because I gave you nothing and you don't deserve anything. So as a result, I can keep it. On the
So,
other hand, if I'm supposed to be an honest person, as Rav Ashi is suggesting, well, then when I buy the land from Stan, clearly I meant for you to own it. And so that would be the distinction between Mar Zutra and Rav Ashi is when instead of selling you the property, Ken, I gave you the property. So now what happens in
well,
that
there's no
situation?
money to return then,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Exactly. There's no money to return. And so the question is, can I keep the property? Right. So the question is, I gave you the beautiful land. I then went and which I didn't own. I then went and bought the land from Stan. And so now the question is do I get to keep that land? Or do I have to give you the land, which you are on and working, because I gave it to you as a gift? Because alternatively, according to Mar Zutra, I can actually kick you off the land and say, you know what, Ken, I know that I gave you this land as a gift, but I actually didn't own it at the time. And so as a result, you need to leave the land, and because now I purchased the land and I want the land.
So
And
you're
I would
taking
be
back the gift
entitled.
then.
What?
He's taking back the gift.
Yes, I'm taking back the gift. That's exactly right. And it
Well,
said, well, effectively, it was not a real gift in the first place because I was giving you something that I didn't know. And so, as a result, according to Mar Zutra, I can do that. And according to Rav Ashi, I would not be able to do it because presumably I don't want to, because even though you might not call me a robber in that situation, you definitely wouldn't call me trustworthy. And so, as a result, I would not want to do that, according to Rav Ashi.
well, that's not very, what's the word? Nice, not gentlemanly. You take back the gift even. That doesn't look good.
Correct. 100%. I agree with you that it's not nice. And the question but is it legal? Is the question. All right. So, having now considered this situation, the situation of a gift being a differentiation, we're going to now consider other situations where if I acquire it or somebody or the robber acquires it, we're not going to assume that he had the purchaser of the stolen land in mind. Okay, so pshita, it's clear. Zabna, and again, now we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines down, first word on the line. It's clear, Zabna. If I sold the land to Moshe after I sold the land to Ken, well, then clearly I am not trying to avoid being called a robber. So as a result, if in that situation I bought the land afterwards, none of you get it. I don't have any of you in mind. I don't mind being called a robber. I sold you both nothing, and as a result, I get to keep the land. Of course, I owe you both the money associated with the land that I sold.
So we sold it
Orsa,
twice?
yeah, I sold it twice. That's the situation. That's the situation where we're going to say that even if after I sell it to you, Ken, I sell it to Moshe, and then I go and buy it from Stan, neither of you get it because I clearly don't care about being called a robber or being called honest because and so as a result, it's clear my intention from the get go was to buy it for myself.
So the two purchasers are on the land fighting with each other.
No. I'm not. They're neither of them are going to be on the land because the court is going to decide in my favor. The court is going to say that land that you, Ken, and you, Moshe, thought you were buying, David didn't have the rights to it, and as a result, you both get kicked off the land. And now that I bought the land from Stan, I do have the rights to it, and so I would get that land. But what you would be entitled to is you would be entitled to any purchase price associated with it and any investment that you made in the land. You'd
Uh-huh.
be entitled to those two things, and I would owe you that money. Okay. So that was case number one. Orsa, if I bequeath it to one of my sons so that I say this property, Admeya Esrim, when I pass, is going to go to you. Well, that's almost like I sold it to Moshe, right? It is a 2-second sale. When I'm clear that I have an intention for my children to get it, then again, presumably I don't purchase it from Stan in order to give it to Ken. The Yahava b'matana, or if I gave it as a gift to Moshe. So again, I'm not. I'm clearly not intending it to go to the first purchaser. So lav laokma kamei lokeach kabai. Clearly, I'm not trying to buy it for Ken in that situation. Naflale Yerusha. What happens if it turns out that the land that I sold did not belong to Stan, but belonged to some relative of mine from whom I inherit the land? So then Yerusha Memelahi. Do we say that Yerusha? No, we say that Yerusha is a passive thing. I didn't go out of my way to acquire it. So then, therefore, Balav Iu Katarach Abasra. So I didn't try to get it. So Gabi. So as a result, Ken would not be entitled to the property. So Gabi Ihu Bechova. Now, what happens if in addition to stealing Stan's land and selling it to Ken, now it turns out that actually Stan happened to owe me money. And now I say to Stan, listen, you owe me money. I'm going to take this particular land that I happen to have sold to Ken, and I want that piece of property to collect the debt. So in that situation, we don't assume that Ken is going to get it, but rather Chazina. We're going to take a look. If Stan has other property, and I told him that I specifically want this piece of property, which I happen to have already sold to Ken, well then, clearly, the reason that I'm asking and insisting on getting this piece of property is because I want to make Ken whole. And so as a result, Ken would get that property, the ELO. But if either Stan only has one piece of property, or he has many pieces of property, and it's Stan who's choosing which piece of property I get, I'm just trying to collect my money. I am not trying to save Ken, save my reputation with Ken, and I would be able to give Ken back his money and keep the property. So Yavam Nale Mitana B'matana. Now, if what happens if Stan now, new case, gives me the land as a gift? Do we say that because I got it as a gift, I therefore wanted it to go to Ken, or no? So Pligi ba Rav Acha v'Ravina. Rav Acha and Ravina disagree about that situation. Chad Amar Matana Kirusha. One says, which is very, very logical, that a gift is like an inheritance, the Hamamela. It happens on its own. Chad Amar Matana Kemecher. And another one says, and the other one says, no, a matana is like a sale, because even though on some level you're doing something out of the goodness of your heart, the truth is that presumably you are there's some transactional nature to everything that we do. And so as a result, when Stan chooses to give me the gift, it's because I made hints that I was looking for this property. I was being really nice to him. I was doing him favors, and he wanted to do me a favor. And so as a result, all the things that I did in order to encourage him to give me the gift is like I was working in order to fix my reputation with Ken. Because if I hadn't done all that work, lo havi yaev le'matana, you wouldn't have given me the gift. And the whole point is I wanted to stand by my word. Now Tosfos jumps on this fact that at the end here we said Delekim behemnuse, and he says mashma, second Tosfos on Ted Zayin Amud Aleph, that mashma dahachi hilchasa, that actually we paskin that the basis is when we had this machlokas again between Mar Zutra and Rav Ashi, that we paskin like Rav Ashi, that we're focused on the trustworthiness. The midelo nakat lishna delo nikre gazlan, because we don't say, we're not talking focused on the fact that he wasn't called a gazlan. V'od tahalacha Rav Ashi dehu basra v'gadol b'chachma b'minyan, and we would also say that we follow Rav Ashi because he's the later opinion. So I just wanted to make sure to mention that. I thought that was an interesting thing. Okay. So now the Gemara considers whether a delay in my purchasing the property would affect whether I intend to buy it on behalf of Ken or not.
Well, you mentioned, I'm sorry, you mentioned the Yerusha. Here it's like Yerusha, but earlier, a few moments ago, we talked about Yerusha, you acquired it by Yerusha, but that
A
it was
gift
like
was like Yerusha. A gift was like Yerusha.
right. That, but earlier we talked about Yerusha a few moments ago, not
Yep.
just here. And so the question I'm wondering, when did the Yerusha take place? Before he stole it, after he stole it, before
No,
the
no, no. The
purchase?
Yerusha clearly took place not only after I stole it, but after I sold it to you.
After he sold it. So, I mean, how does that, because the Yerusha was something he knew about anyway, 20 years ago, 30, whatever it was. I mean, it was already implanted. So what difference does it make when it really takes place?
Well, because until the Yerusha takes place, the possession belongs to the robber's father. The robber doesn't own it. He sold his father's piece of property to you, and now only after he sold it to you did the father die. And we say in that situation that you do not get it, Ken, because the robber didn't do anything intentionally to try and take advantage of it. And of course, the truth is that if there are multiple children, he didn't even know he was going to necessarily get that piece of property because it depends on how they divide up the property. So, but the bottom line is that a Yerusha, we assume does not that when the robber gets the Yerusha, it does not go to the purchaser who purchased from the robber, but a gift would potentially, that's the machlokus between Ravina and Ravacha. Okay, so now ad emas nechale deleikum b'hamnuse. So right, so we're now basically middle of the daf until when, right, when one or two lines above behahi in the Tosos on the left hand side of the page. So until how long do I have as the robber to buy the land and still be viewed as trying to focus on my trustworthiness or in avoiding being called a robber? So we're going to have three different opinions. Amar Rav Huna ad shas ha'amada b'din, until the land is taken away and Ken brings me to court. Once Ken brings me to court, and Rashi has this clear, so ad shas ha'amada b'din, ad shiyatrafua min ha'lokeach, once it's taken away from the purchaser, that's the person that's Stan taking it back from Ken. V'yamidu b'din, and now Ken brings me to court. Aval misha amad b'risho. So now that you stood me up in my evilness, ad shas hamad b'din. Once we've had this moment that you put me at in front of the court. So gali adaite. So now it's clear delo mehemen that I'm not trustworthy. Who? And so now, if I buy it at this point, I'm clearly not intending it to go to Ken. So that's answer to Rav Huna. Chiyabar Rav Amar. Chiyabar Rav says, you know what? It's a little bit longer than that. Adamata adrakta liyade. And so Rashi explains Adamata adrakta liyade. Again, now this is right opposite the Tosos Misha Irish on the left-hand side. So on the right-hand side, Ad Sheyachayvuhu Basin. Not only does Basin lifroa, not only does Basin have to tell me that I have to pay the Basin, Ma'usav, but then I need to rebel and not have paid. Ad Shekasu Psak Din. So much so that we have to wait the 90 days for you to get a Psak Din that you would get on all of my possessions. That anything that you can find, you can take. That's 90 days after the court case ends. As we saw at the end of Bava Kama, another connection between this first parak of Bava Metzia and the end of Bava Kama.
So what's the case here? That the court decides that this person is a Gazlan, but you have to wait 90 days, or the fellow has to prove that he purchased it?
So as a reminder, so as we saw at the end of Bava Kama, which is a great chazara, because I didn't really remember it so well either, but you say the first 30 days is I'm trying to find the money. The next 30 days, I'm trying to sell my property. The last 30 days, the buyer is trying to get it. So we give me 90 days to find the money to pay you, Ken. If after those 90 days, I still have not successfully found the money to pay you, Ken, So then the court will write you essentially a claim document that allows you to literally go into my field and take possessions and take it. Okay, so that's what you will get after 90 days. And
But
so according to
it's
Rav
stolen
Chia,
property, right?
what?
It's stolen property, isn't it?
No, you're trying to collect from the stuff I actually own. You can't collect from things I don't own. You're trying to get your money back because Stan has come and already took the land away from you. That's long in the past. Stan came and took the money away from you. According to Rav Huna, as soon as you bring me to court, so then I'm already viewed as a robber. And so if I buy it now, I'm not buying it with you in mind. Akia says, no, I might still buy it with you in mind, as long as I have not yet gone so long as so that the court would write you a document, Ken, that allows you to go to my property and just take it, which is 90 days after the court reaches its decision. So then I may have had you in mind when I bought the property. That's Chia's opinion. And now the last of the opinions, Rav Papa Amar, Ad Maskalan Yome Achrazuta. That actually after the 90 days, so you now say, you go back to court and say, I found David's property. I found the robber's property. Court, you need to sell that property so that I can get it and get paid back, because David owes me $100,000 that I paid for the property and another $50,000 that I invested in the property. And this piece of property that David has that he really owns, that's worth at least $200,000. So sell that property because I want my cash. And so the court then begins a process of announcing for 30 days a sale of my property. It is all the way until then that Rav Papa says that I have to try and buy the land on your behalf. And if I bought the land before they make the announcement of the sale of my property as a robber, well, then we'll assume that I bought it on your behalf. Okay. So
how much time is that then?
That's at least 90 days after the court reaches its decision and you find the property. You have to actually find the property. If we take a look at the next Rashi, Ad Machkalan Yoma Da'achrazata La'achar Shematza Zek Karka. Once you, this one, meaning the purchaser who got gypped, finds the land, Michel Gazlan, that belongs to the robber, Ubala Basin, and now you've come to court. The Hain Makrizin, and now the court will announce Shekol Misha Rotza Liknos Karka, that anybody who wants to buy this land that I own, Yavo V'Yikachena, can come and buy it. Kedamrin Be'erach and Shum Hayatomim Shloshim Yom, and we say that is going to be 30 days, and that's in that parak Shum Hayatomim. So okay, so now the point is that we've now determined that there is a limit to how long I have to try and buy it on behalf of Ken. And after that point, we'll assume that I was buying it on behalf of myself. So Maskifla Rami Barchama. So Rami Barchama says, 1 second. Mechti. How in the world, when I go and buy the land, how is it that Ken acquires it? Bahai you want to say that he acquires it with the shtar that I sold him the land with in the very beginning? That contract is totally worthless. It's like a piece of pottery. So Amrle Rava. So Rava says to that listen, the amino, it's with the belief, the benefit of the belief. That Ken did not complain. At some point, Ken figured out that the land actually belongs to Stan. And what did Ken do? Ken said, you know what? David's a trustworthy guy. I know he's going to come through for me, and he's going to make sure that I'm not buying a pig in a poke, and that I actually get this land. Because samech alay, and you relied on me. And so as a result, that's why I'm going to go through the effort of buying it. So Gamar umaknile. And so as a result, because of that kindness that Ken offers on my behalf, I'm going to effectively acquire it for Ken. So Masiv Rav Sheshis, So Rav Sheshes said, 1 second, we have a problem here, because that is essentially a davar shelo ba la'olam, meaning if I sell something that I do not currently own, well, then I'm selling something that doesn't exist. How can I do that? So Masha Irish Sha'ab mi Abba Machorlach. If I say to somebody that what I will inherit from my father, I'm selling to you, Masha Ta'ala Mitsudasi Machorlach, what I'm going to catch in my net is going to be sold to you. Lo Amar Klum. I have not successfully sold anything. Misha Irish Mina Abba Hayom Machorlach. But if I tell you that, if God forbid, my father were on his deathbed, and I say to you, what I inherit from my father today, I'm going to sell to you. Mashatala mitsudasi hayom makarlak, or what I catch today is going to be sold to you. Dvarav kayamin. Then my words are a valid transaction. Amarami Barchama, Hagavra, Bahad Tayuvta. Rami Barchama points out, oh, this is a great man, this Rav Sheshes, and he's just refuted the explanation. How could it be that the robber ever acquired the thing or the field on behalf of Ken? He was effectively, if we're saying that, creating a transaction about something that never existed. So Amarava Gavra Kachazina, Tiyuvta Lo Kachazina. Rava says, no, I see a great man. Yes, Rav Sheshes is awesome, but he hasn't refuted it, because Haka Samcha Adaite. The difference is what kind of reliance exists. That when take a look, and lo samcha daite, Rashi, last of the narrow lines, end of the line, lo samcha daite, delokea, that this purchaser, namely Ken, did not have reliance. I'm sorry, the purchaser in the case of this brisa, where I said that I was going to give everything that I inherit to you, or everything that I catch. Who says that this person is going to inherit anything from his father? Shema Yimkor Aviv Nechasav B'chayav. Maybe he'll sell everything off in his lifetime, and he won't inherit any pieces of property. And so, as a result, you won't in that situation where I say that whatever I inherit, I'm selling to you, or whatever I catch, I'm selling to you in the future. So the purchaser in that situation has no sense of reliance on the seller. And therefore, that's why that's not going to be a good sale. But here, when in the robber situation, Ken relies on me and says, yes, I know that David is going to come through for me in the end. And so as a result, he's going to hear the purchaser is confident that I, the robber, am going to go and trouble myself and get the land for him. So I won't be called a Gazlan. And yet, on the other case, in the Brisa, the purchaser would not be confident that I'm going to inherit anything or that I'm going to catch anything.
Why would he say that he would rely on him, even though he says the person doesn't want to be considered a Gazlan, but nonetheless, this purchaser knows that the land actually belonged to Stan, as you said, it's stolen land. So why would he? But he sees that this person's a Gazlan. Why would he rely on him to come through in the end?
It's an excellent question, and I guess the answer is, we're making essentially that assumption. But the bottom line is that Jewish people hopefully are good people, that are nice people, and they will come through in the end. I don't have a really great answer to that.
He's a nice person, but he stole the land from the other person.
Yeah, but maybe he's going to try and make good on it. So they, in the end, it's the story of almost every movie. The bad guy becomes a good guy. All right, Shlachua l'kamei de Rabbi Abba bar Zabda, and we had this same kind of situation where the question was this disproof was sent to Rabbi Abba bar Zabda. Amar lahu zo ein tzricha lifnim. It doesn't need to even be discussed. It's clearly that it's not a problem. Amar Rabba zo tzricha lifnim v'lifnim lifnim. It has to be analyzed. And we have to explain that this is one case. It's confident. The purchaser knows, has confidence in the thief or the speaker, and the other case does not. Hava uvda b'fum bedisa. There was a similar situation from bedisa. Va'osvei amar lehu Rav Yosef zo ein tzricha lifnim. Doesn't even need to be brought inside. Amar le Abaye tzricha lifnim lifnim lifnim. It has to be definitely discussed and analyzed. Hacha sam kadaite, hacha lo sam kadaite. One is where the purchaser is confident, and one is where the purchaser is not. Umaishna ratio. Well, 1 second. Why is the situation in that brisa where I say to you everything that I catch, I'm going to sell to you, or everything that my father inherits allows me to inherit, I'm going to sell to you? That's going to be not valid. But the second case of where I referenced today, that will be valid. So I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Stefa misha iresh mi abba hayom mishum kvod aviv mashatala mitzudasi hayom. No, because I'm referencing today. I'm sorry. I apologize. I should have just stopped with Masha Irish Mi Abba Hayom. When I say what I'm going to inherit from my father today, Mishum Kavod Aviv, it's because of my honoring my father. That here my father is about to die, so clearly that's a situation where you're going to trust me that I'm going to want to make sure to sell you something real, and because I need the money in order to bury my father and to provide him with takrichin. With shrouds. And when I say that I want to sell what I have caught today, as we turn to Ted Zion bet, it's because I need to I need to make a livelihood. So as a result, that's why I'm going to have that intention. So Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav HaOmer L'chaberu Sadash Ani Lo Kayach Uklishekechachana Kanuya Lacha Me'achshav Kana. If I tell you that that a field that I'm going to purchase is going to be sold to you, so then that situation is that will work. If I just say I'm going to buy a field. Now, Amar Rava Mistabra Milsa Derav Besadistam. It makes a lot of sense if I just say that I'm going to buy a field. That when I then buy the field, that field will be sold to you. But if I were to say this particular field, then it doesn't really make sense because how do I know that the person whose owner is going to sell that field to him? And yet, if by God, Amar Rav afilu b'sadazu. But Rav actually believes that even when you say this field, that if I sell you my future rights to this field, then it would work. Mikti, Rav command Amr Lashmaite, and because let's see, who does Rav believe? Who does Rav hold like? Rabbi Meir. Rav clearly holds like Rabbi Meir. To Amar Adam Makna Davar Shelo Bala Olam, because Rabbi Meir is the one who says that you can acquire something that hasn't yet come into existence. Tanya Haomer Leisha Hiskad Shili Laakar Iskayer Laakar Shatiskayeri Laakar Iskarer Laakar Shatishkari Laakar Yamas Baalech Laakar Yaklos left Ayivamech Laakar Shatamas Akosech Aina Mikudeshes. And Rabbi Meir Omer Mikudeshes. So in all those situations, let's take a look at them. So if he says that I'm going to marry you after my conversion, after your conversion, after my freedom, after your freedom, after your husband dies, after your Yavam performs chalitza, or after your sister dies because I was married to your sister, and so as a result, I'm not allowed to marry you. So in all those situations, she's not married because the thing does not exist. The situation could not exist at this moment. But Rabbi Meir says she is married because you are allowed to create a transaction of an item that does not yet exist. And when you reference a specific wife, a woman, so that's like this field, because who knows that she's going to say yes. And yet Rabbi Meir says she's married, and so as a result, clearly Rav says that works.
What if the sale falls through? There's many cases where a sale is not actuated for, right?
Well, again, that's the machlokus. Whether the first question is whether that sale is even a valid sale in the first place. If I say to you, I'm going to sell you a field that I purchased down the line, that is not a valid transaction at all. It's is in the end the way we paskin. So as a result, we have to actually do a different kind of transaction in order to make that work. The bottom line is that transaction is trying to sell something that doesn't yet exist, right. And I believe we paskin that kind of sale doesn't work. because in fact we've certainly paskin like the Chachamim, like Tanakama in that brisa about all the women who he's trying to marry. So Amar Shmuel Hamotzi Shtar Hakna B'Shuk. If you find a document of acquisition in the marketplace. Now Rashi explains, it's about 20 lines down in Rashi, Shekanu Mimenu, that it was acquired from the debtor. Shafilu lo yilva hamos shibad atzmo l'shalamim. That the debtor is agreeing that even if no loan is ever made, I am committing myself to pay back the amount in this document. So essentially, in some ways, it's really like a check, because the check doesn't require any kind of a conveyance of anything. There's no requirement that I give you money in order for you to write me a check, but you just write me a check. So yachziru leba'alim. So in that situation, Shmuel says that you should return it to the original owner, because remember, in the Mishnah we saw that if you found a debt document, you don't return it, because we're worried that maybe it was never loaned in the first place, and maybe it was already paid. Because of little vos below lava, because here, if we were ever worried about the fact that maybe the loan never happened, he already obligated himself, even if the loan didn't happen. And if we're worried about being the payment, we shouldn't worry about a payment. Because if in fact it got paid, then it would be the obligation of the debtor to rip up the loan. The debtor's not going to allow that document to still exist. So Amar of Nachman, Abba min Safre Dainei Demar Shmuel Hava. My father was one of the Sofrim in Shmuel's court. V'havina kvar shisa kvar sheva, and I was like 6 or 7. Udacharna dahavu machrazei ba'amre, and I remember them saying, Hanishtari aknayasa the mishtakre beshuka, that when it came to documents that were found in the shuk, nahadrino lamarhai, that they should get returned to their owners. So Amar of Amram af anantanina. We also have a Mishnah that actually we're going to see in a couple of days on Kaf Amud Aleph that says the following: Kol masa based in any kind of court action, hareza yachzer, you return it to the person who the court found for. Alma lo chashin leperon. So doesn't that show that we don't worry about payment? So Amar le Rabbi Zera chaltasa ba'adrachta. No, that's talking about a situation where you have a document of foreclosure or seizure. The la b'nei peron in who those things are not payable, meaning that they're talking about specific property that you're supposed to collect with it. So Amarav of Ahani la b'nei paron. You know, 1 second, why aren't they payable? V'ha amrin in Ardai. We said in Arda Shuma Hadar ad Tresar Yarchev Shata, that a person who has his property seized has at least 12 months to come up with the money and get back his property. V'amar Amemar, and Amemar goes further. Anam in Narda, I'm from Narda. Usfir li deshuma hadar la'olam, that the person who has his property seized can always buy back his property by paying the original amount due. The reason is the following. Yes, they are talking about specific properties, but the Amri Ihu the Afsid Amnashe, to be Idna de Pare, that when here we're dealing with a situation where the person brought the loss upon himself, because he either needed to rip up the document, or he should have another document written that says that he was taking the property back. The Medina are lo bayim mehadar. Now, according to the strict letter of the law, the land does not need to be returned to the debtor if he gives the money. That why is it that we allow the debtor to buy back the land within 1 year, according to the people in Narda? It's because we should do nice. We should do what's fair and good. Huda Amar Rabbanan Tahadar, and that's why the rabbi said that it should be returned. Hilkach Mereja Huda Kazavin. So now when he knew at the very beginning that he purchased the land again, he should have insisted that he get a new bill of sale, because after all, he had no biblical right to that property back. It was something that was given to him rabbinically. So Gabi Shtar Chov, now when it comes with respect to a Shtar Chov, my Ikalamemer, what do we say? Im Isa de Pare, if you say that it was paid back, shouldn't he have ripped up his note? So Amar ishtamute kap mishtamit lay. Maybe the creditor avoided the having to rip up the note, and he told him to Amar lay lamachar yavnalach. I'm going to give it to you tomorrow. I'll give you back the document tomorrow. Dahashta leise gabai, because I don't have it with me. Inami apshite desafra zayir lay. Or maybe the creditor would say, listen, you paid back the amount you owe me, but you have to pay me for the cost of the fact that I had to pay for the scribe to write the note. So you need to pay me for that. And so as a result, that's why we're not going to say it. That's why I might not have given back you the note. And that's why when it comes to regular indebtedness, we will say that that our Mishnah says you don't give it back. But when it comes to the special note of indebtedness that says that where you guarantee that you're going to pay the money, irrespective of whether or not you ever borrowed it, there we will give it back to the original owner. So Amar Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Hamotzi Shtarcho B'Shuk. If you find a note in the marketplace, Afal Pi Shelo Shekasabo Henpek, even though it has a certification in it that the court wrote to show that it was a valid contract, Lo Yachzer Labam, you don't return it to the owner. So Lomi by Hekadolo Kasabo Henpik. And certainly when it doesn't have a Henpik, when it doesn't have that certification, you don't return it. Because in that situation, maybe the person wrote it to borrow it and never actually borrowed the money. But even if in fact the person has a henpik, a certification from a court, well, 1 second, doesn't the henpik mean that it was certified? And so lo yakser the chayshin leparon, because and it doesn't that show that we're worried about it being paid back? So Esvei Rabbi Yirmi, and it shows that we're worried about it being paid back. So Esvei Rabbi Yirmi Yala Rabbi Abahu Kol Masa based in Hareze Yakser. But 1 second, we have the next Mishnah is going to tell us that every act of court should get paid back. So Amar Le Yirmiya Lo Kol Masa based in Shavin. Not every thing is alike. But maybe we're talking about where the person is known to have been a liar. So Amar Rabba Mushum Tehuksa Kafran Chada Zimna Tulo Paraklal. 1 second, are we going to say that because the debtor was once presumed a liar, we're never going to assume he's never going to pay, and as a result, we should always return the document to the person? No, that's not the case that we're talking about. We're not talking about a henpek. We're not talking about a certification. Rather, Allah Amar Rabba Masnisin Bishtar Chaltasa Ba'adrachta. As we saw Rabbi Zaira say earlier, we're talking about specific foreclosures and seizures where the property itself is mentioned in the document. And so as a result, only in that situation are we going to say that you get the property, that we give the warrant, that give the document back to the original owner. So now we are talking about having mentioned a presumed liar. We're going to now turn to the situation. Sorry for not scrolling. So we're going to now turn to the situation where the Gemara is going to discuss when someone will be presumed to be a liar. But for that discussion, you'll have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Wish you all a Shabbat.
Weren't we saying earlier, as you referenced a few dafim ago, I guess that we in general do not return the document to the owner,
correct.
To the creditor, and sometimes to neither one. It goes to the court.
Correct. Well, when we don't return it to the creditor, we're effectively returning it to no one. That's exactly right. And the answer is that those situations are situations where the document we don't know. They don't basically the situations that you do return it are effectively exceptions. And the 3 exceptions that we've identified today are, at the end of the day, a document where you just commit to pay me money, period, irrespective of whether you ever borrow the money. A document where you where that you get from a court that allows you to collect a specific piece of property, or a document that you get from the court that effectively gets you to sell a specific piece of property. Those are the 3 documents that we're going to give back to you, the lender / creditor, and only in those situations. Because in those situations, we're going to say that's where we're going to impose an extra obligation on the debtor to make clear that if in fact he's paid, he needs a receipt. He needs something else. He needs to do something. He needs to get rid of that document. He doesn't have to do, he needs to make sure that that document does no longer exist at the end of the day. Those are the three situations. But in all other situations, even a document of debt that was certified by a court, we won't say that it needs to be ripped up. We can say that maybe the guy avoided ripping it up, and therefore, but it was really in fact paid. So in all those other situations, we're worried about it. But in these three situations, we're going to put the liability, the obligation to get rid of that document on the debtor rather than on the creditor.
What are the three situations again? One where he says he's going to give money, no, regardless. What were the other two?
The other two are the situations of Bishtare Chaltosa and Adrachta. Those are those last two situations: the certificate of foreclosure and a seizure warrant. So foreclosure, I believe, means that it's that the document is going to be the property is going to be sold, and a seizure is where you're actually just grabbing the property. So those two situations, we're going to say, because they reference specific property, we're going to say that we're going to assume that if in fact that I'm still on that property, we're going to assume that it means that I still owe that money.
Oh, so then it goes back to the creditor. The
exactly. In those situations,
it'll
go back to the creditor.
Okay.
All right. Have a wonderful Shabbos. God willing, we'll pick up again. We're going to do Motzi Shabbos this week. Please take a look at the WhatsApp because it's not clear. At some point, God willing, we may move to either before Mincha or between Mincha Maariv for continuing the daf on Shabbos. So keep an eye on
Motzi Shabbos. Motzi, you mean on continuing Motzi Shabbos?
Yes, we're not going to, instead of doing the daf on Motzi Shabbos, we're going to move the daf that's done on Shabbos to Shabbos itself, to being done immediately before Mincha on Shabbos here at HAR, or between Mincha and Maariv. But like I said, keep an eye on.
We talked about that last week, and we may continue to do it Motzi Shabbat.
And that's totally fine. I just want to make sure that we don't lose anybody, that gets confused. So if that's what the decision was made already, then
no, it wasn't made. We mentioned it last week.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. That's my point. My point is that that's still to be decided. So keep an eye on your WhatsApp and look forward to continuing our learning together. Have a Shabbat Shalom.